the attention, do us a favor, no, man. Share this video with a friend or two or 5,000 so you can have. But if everybody knows it, why would we behave like we don't so often? It's like we don't realize how important it is until it becomes scarce or under threat. People, we can't continue like this. We have to protect our water resources, and we all, every single Jamaican has a role to play in this process. From little picnic, go right up to ageable people. And in light of our recent incident where one of our major rivers in St. Catherine was contaminated, we wanted to come today and take a deep dive in us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Thank you, Vaughn.
All right,
Glad to
first up,
be with you and glad to be with your listeners and viewers.
Vaughn is perfectly fine. Mr. Davis was my father, so you can feel free to just call me Vaughn. All right. No, let's just begin at the beginning. Water Resources Authority. What most persons might not necessarily be familiar with the work that you do, so let's just give them a background of what the work of the Water Resources Authority is, what you do, roles, responsibilities, etc.
Quarterly, with hydrologic data, we exercise planning in relation to a master plan that we produce a master plan on water quality control plans. We allocate water resources by monitoring abstraction, and we maintain a license base in that regard, abstraction and for well drilling and so on. We are concerned with the quality of water resources by monitoring water quality in hydrologic basins. And we provide technical support to agencies, government agencies like NEPA, ODPEM, with regards to flooding, anything like that. And of course, just about anything else that we're called upon to, but those are specific under the Act. So in terms of I would say in terms of what you'd call it now, our responsibilities. Apart from monitoring abstraction of water, we're concerned.
Mr. Pete, Mr. Clark, that's a fancy word, Abstraction. What do
Well,
you really mean when you say
the
abstraction?
withdrawal of water,
That sounds
the
like you're
withdrawal
basically
of
saying
water from the resource.
the thieving of water, basically.
No,
Not
not the
thieving.
teaching,
I think
because
whenever we say abstraction, that's the word, that's the
no,
nice
no,
word
no,
that
no,
we
no,
use.
no, no. Actually, the abstraction, it is controlled abstraction. So first of all, if you want to abstract water, and if you have the right to water and you're using it for your own personal domestic purposes, and there's a limit to how much you would then be taking. You can withdraw it freely for your domestic purposes. So if there's a river or stream or a spring on your property, you can use it. If you're going into larger concerns now, then you'll have to be licensed, and that is what the whole thing is about. So there's a regime that we maintain of 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 um of a database with licensees, and then they would then get a license to abstract a particular amount of water.
Okay.
Um, and that license is renewable every 5 years.
So you
So
regulate
it would so we're a regulating agency,
regulate
and
the
it would
quantities of
be
water persons can take from a particular location
exactly
and so on and so forth.
exactly, because you have to have concerns relative to other persons who want to abstract at times. All right. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to you have to maintain a balance so that at the end of the day, the resource itself, as best as possible, is not totally depleted, that it still continues to do its environmental work. So you don't want to take all of a river, for instance, and then no, the the
Then nobody else can
marine
get
life,
none, yeah.
fish and so on. But even worse, you also have to consider what we call the environmental flow, so that the environment can still exist.
Mm-hmm.
That river environment can still exist. With regards to taking water out of the ground, you have to be careful how you take it, because if you take too much or take it at too great a rate, you can actually pull seawater. Because
Okay.
just like how, yeah, because just like how the rivers flow to the sea, the groundwater underground is also moving. It's not stationary, it's also moving. And it's also moving towards the sea. So it's just that you can then know, because of that connection that you would have, you could then, if you pump too hard, you could actually start pulling the seawater towards your well, and that can cause a contamination issue. So those are all issues.
So, Mr.
So
Clark, now I want you to and I think to get a sense after we get a sense of the work that you kind of do. I want you to give me like a snapshot of water in Jamaica. I mean, as general as that sounds. But give me an idea of what, when you come into work every day and you start getting a sense of the water resources of Jamaica and how they are being used. Just give me an idea of what that looks like. If we just grab a layman off the street and say, well, this is the situation with the water resources in Jamaica, in a generalized kind of way. Give me an idea of what you look at when you look at Jamaica on a daily basis.
Well, what we're seeing, first of all, what we're seeing is that, of course, we have two main sources of getting water, either from rivers and springs or from underground. If it's coming from underground, then that means you're drilling wells and you're pumping the water up from out of the ground. You're either putting it into pipelines or you're putting it into a canal. If you're harnessing rivers or springs, then you're now harnessing it and probably treating it at the point or conveying it like the Yalas pipeline does to a greater distance for treatment, because the Yalas pipeline, you actually bring the water from St. Thomas into Kingston, and then you're treating it in Kingston. So those are the two ways that in which we are accessing our water resources. As much as we see all of these rivers that we all know or are aware of, or sometimes are familiar with, and when we look at all of that water that's available above ground in these rivers and springs and streams annually, which you don't see, but what I see from the desk that I sit at is that there's a lot more water available underground on an annual basis than what you're seeing in the rivers. So when you add up all of those river will in and of itself by its replenishment and swift flow, readily quickly clean up itself. Once there's just fresh, clean water coming in, then it will substitute, it will push away that contaminated water downstream and then be replaced with fresh flow. On the other hand, groundwater moves exceedingly slow compared to a river. So the groundwater may move just a meter per year or 2 meters per year. So that means that if that replenishment takes a much, much longer time to happen. We have, as much as I said, that we have probably 4 times more groundwater that's available for use than river and stream water. I mean, some of it is contaminated underground and is not readily usable. It could be from industrial waste and so on, industrial effluents. The sugarcane industry in the past, in the areas where factories are, there's some amount of contamination in groundwater in those areas. There is some amount of contamination in groundwater where the bauxite plants had those mud lakes and so on. Those mud lakes were sitting on the ground for how long, and just kept on adding, the waste caustic soda product to it, so it would soak down into the ground and affect groundwater. There's other places where the groundwater is contaminated by what I spoke about before, the overpumping. So there's some parts where long before the Water Resources came into force, Water Resources Authority came into force, people would have been pumping a lot under less rigorous and careful conditions. And that overpumping could have taken place then, and some of our wells are contaminated with seawater. They're gone saline, in other words. So these have happened. So I'm not going to say that all of the water is instantly available that is on the ground.
Okay. But that was my next question, to be honest.
Right. So, but generally speaking, in the main, we use more, even in our normal everyday conditions right now, we use more groundwater to meet our needs than we're using river water. And our needs are, of course, domestic needs, agricultural needs, industrial needs, and tourism needs. And then, of course, there's another one which is not consuming any water really, which is we call it non-consumptive. We do have hydro plants in Jamaica that are operating. And they are using the water to
generate energy and so
generate electricity, generate energy, and then it goes back to the environment.
So let me ask you this now. It's a question, I guess, for that comes up every around, but just a little bit of a tangent, but follow me all the same. Every time when it comes to like summer, thankfully it wasn't a big challenge this summer, but in the past we've had situations where there had to be sustained lockoffs and because what the
Mm-hmm.
argument that we hear is that restricted rain, small rainfall, and
Mm-hmm.
that has caused the catchments to go down to levels where they can't necessarily supply on a regular basis. But then it sounds to me like with the underground water resources that we have, why is it such a difficulty to be able to provide water, for example, in the corporate area and so on,
Round the
other
clock,
sections of the
round,
yeah,
round the clock, round a year.
exactly.
The main difficulty would be the infrastructure to make it happen.
Okay.
So the water is one thing, but then you know have to bring that water to the surface. And more than likely, where it is not where you have that large town or city or whatever it is that you're talking about. So you then have to put in the infrastructure and do piping and all of that, to how best the creation of the master has in it the projections with regard to climate change. And the major projections that would impact it in a negative way would be rising temperatures, rising seawater levels. So rising seawater, there is predicted to be possibly less rainfall. Just that when you do get the rain, you'll get it in more intense rain, but it will be actually less rainfall. And more importantly, that with temperatures going up, the evaporation levels also will go up. So all of those are what are considered now in the current iteration of the master plan. So in looking at an event horizon, I think we're going to use an event horizon of up to 2050 or 2070. In that regard, we had to consider the impact of climate change and to consider where we could be. Um, so we are full supporters of the mantra that's coming out of the temperature rise in and around our surroundings by no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Hold and sequester and keep carbon rather than it going into the atmosphere and becoming greenhouse gases and increasing temperatures and all of these kinds of things. So it the whole thing is joined up in that sometimes you might say, well, water is responsibility of water resources are to seriously consider where we can reforest and all of these kind of things, where we need to, you know, where we need to look at the possibility of substituting our water use and restrict the amount of fresh water that you're taking to go through underground to water something,
Mm.
right? So all of that is a part of the mix. Now, we all know that there's a big stigma in Jamaica about using, and not just Jamaica, in the Caribbean and most of any country that is a part of an Africa, for instance, the non-consumptive crops. So if you're going to be putting in, um, let's say you're going to be putting in cotton, you could then irrigate cotton with that. If you're going to be putting in bamboo, I've heard, for instance, that they want to put in large tracts of bamboo because bamboo is a viable wood product that
Mm.
can be turned into not just a lumber product. We can protect our watersheds a whole lot better. We can recognize the worth of the watersheds and the importance of the watersheds. And then what we can do is where they are deteriorating, we can resuscitate them. Reforestation is a program concept that is not strange all around the world, where watersheds that need rehabilitation. So reforestation is one issue. So then now taking it even closer down now, the matter of what the average person does, the dumping into gullies is not good. The indiscriminate use of fertilizers and chemicals is not good. The indiscriminate disposal of industrial waste,
Mm.
is not good. All of these kinds of things. I mean, you've touched on the matter of Real Kobe and what happened there. No, the question is, was it an indiscriminate disposal that it would impact their own storage capacity, and then they would have to, for safety of the storage capacity itself, so that it doesn't become too full and breaks like even dams. They have to make sure that they have release for dams.
Mm.
And you'll see these releases all the time. You'll see water always spilling and so on. Not necessarily, this is not the water to keep the environmental flow going. These are for the safety of the structure. So in terms of for the safety of the structure, there is this arrangement for that release. All right. Now, sometimes things don't go quite right, and you have the major environmental issues as we're seeing right now.
Mm.
Um, but generally speaking, so I wouldn't. It's not necessarily that is an indiscriminate release. Actually was a controlled, deliberate release, but it just was things just didn't go right. But you do have indiscriminate releases, where factories have just, not put in or failed to put in or failed to maintain the structures that they should be having to treat their effluent before it is released to the environment, and those things cause problems.
Mm.
Now, NEPA usually is there quickly to jump on all of these people when these things happen, when it's brought to NEPA's attention and these things happen and it's brought to their attention, then they're quickly jump on that, yes. But at the end of the day, as a water resource authority, we always have a concern about a release, whether it is timed or ill-timed, whether it is discriminate or indiscriminate. We do, I mean, for our purposes, if it never ever is happening, we are the happiest people.
Mm.
We understand that there are particular operations that how the operations are set up, it is not just likely, it is inevitable that these things will happen, and we can only then hope that it happens under the conditions that have been predicted, and the conditions that have been allowed, and that's where that is.
So how do you play a role in spreading the message of protecting and protecting the
Well,
water resources? I mean, NEPA naturally is the more of the is the
yeah,
regulator in that
well,
regard, but I would imagine
yeah.
because you are hands on the ground, actually testing and examining the water resources. Where do you fit into that process?
All right. So while NEPA plays the role of the environmental manager, we more play the role of managing our abstractors, and we have many abstractors. All right. And they're abstracting millions of gallons of water per year.
Mm-hmm.
The National Water Commission, as you would guess, is
Yeah.
abstracting millions of gallons of water. I mean, Kingston uses 60 million gallons per day,
Mm.
just Kingston. So that gives you an idea of how much water they are abstracting. The National Irrigation Commission abstracts another phenomenal amount. The JPS abstracts another phenomenal amount. And then there are other abstractors all over. Now, what we do is as a part of our licensing regime, our licensees have to do water quality analyses twice per year. All right. It is a part of them maintaining their license. And then they have to use accredited laboratories to get those results and submit those results to us. So you can't go cook them up.
Mm.
You're using accredited, ISO whatever thousand, laboratory services. So we demand that these are done, and then no, we can then no make assessments and make whatever projections we can make if we pick up any trends with quality from that point of view. So it's largely within that realm that we manage quality.
All right, so you're more you make sure that the regular abstractors, as they call them, are the ones who are making sure that they're appropriately utilizing the water resources and make sure that them
Yeah,
don't take too much and then leave
right. Because that
don't
is
leave
very
enough.
important. That's so very important. And that's exactly why we came into being. Because you do have there's a thing called water rights and there's a thing called water conflicts,
Mm.
right? And if you're along a river and there's somebody downstream and you're taking all of the river for your 50,000 chicken farm and not leaving any for somebody downstream, then you can have water conflicts. At the same time, you do have a right. If that river is running through your property, there's some amount of right. So it's a matter of balancing rights with use to subdue conflict.
All right. So in terms of when you find if it's a case where somebody I take too much or they're overdoing it, and how do you
Mm.
what do you do then when you find a situation?
That you've been over abstracting. And because you've been a bad student, then normally you get a license for 5 years. We're going to give you a license for 1 year.
Mm.
Watch you. So under a provisional system, and um, have a license, it's basically provisionally, and have to operate under the proviso of maintaining your abstraction levels within what the license says that you can abstract, and putting in sending in your water quality and so on. Now, if you can do that, then fine. You'll get like a 5-year license the next time. Or we could look at you and say you've been over abstracting, but there's more of it. Your license says you cannot, you want 500,000 gallons a day, and you're abstracting 700,000 gallons a day. But when we do our assessment, we recognize that you could actually get 700,000 gallons a day. The resource is there available. You're not creating any negativity. So in that case, now we'd encourage you now to reapply for a license at the higher volume, since we know that we can allow you to get that higher volume. So all of those there are scenarios within the overall mechanism that allow for not just I would say punishment, but also for how we would then work together so that what you're doing doesn't your actions do not compromise the terms of your license.
So let me ask you this: is it a situation where if let's say I have a land, I find a piece of land or something, but I don't necessarily feel like I want to connect to NWC's grid for whatever reason, and I find some water, I would have to apply to water resources to start using that water on my space, if or just be able to use it and set up a situation where I can supply plumbing to my house, etc., etc.
Yeah. Well, once you're taking it from underground, you have to apply for a license
Okay.
for those domestic needs or whatever. If you're taking it from above ground, if you found a piece of land with a stream or a spring on it, a spring head on it, and you don't want pipe operator showers, run your kitchen, do your normal, just be your little one man, one house NWC kind of system, then you wouldn't need a license for that. The only thing you'd need to satisfy not just us, but just about anybody else, is that you have a right to that spring. So I guess your title or something would say that the spring is yours, or maybe there's some covenant on somebody's title that would say that you have access to that water or whatever. So in the case of your domestic use, right, a person can abstract and use water without a license. If they have the right to that source of water, so if you bought the land and the source is on your land, that's obvious. You immediately and clearly have that right. It could actually be on somebody else's property, but it's coming to you. And secondly, if that water is being used for domestic use, that's drinking, washing, cooking, sanitary purposes, small holding, farming, gardening, watering, small livestock, and so on, and where the area of the land, overall area, is less than half a hectare, then you don't need a license.
Okay.
The land is not just small holding farming. So in other words, if you put in 10 rows of cabbage, 100 cabbage heads, clearly that's your cabbage. You're gonna be eating cabbage. If you put in 4 acres of cabbage, you're not eating 4 acres of cabbage, party. What you are doing, you gone in a bit,
Yeah, it's a big time manufacturer. So it's like it's a maths, it's maths basically.
Yeah,
So you
like you have a,
as a one man probably not going to affect the overall thing. But if you're gone into a whole different kind of production,
and chickens, you might, so you have a look, you have a little coop with 30, 40 chickens in there. You know, you could easily be eating 2 chickens a week and giving away to your cousin and your grandmother and your mother who live somewhere else another 2, 4, 6 chickens. But if you have 3,000 chickens, a different story.
All right. I guess as we kind of move to bring things down, can you just share with me, like, in terms of your, I would say, short to medium outlook for what the Water Resources Authority has planned, especially, I guess, in light of the master plan that you have? What's the outlook going forward, and, what members of the public could be aware of in terms of Jamaica's water resources and how they should be, how you would prefer that things kind of operate in Jamaica at the moment?
Well, let me start with the easier thing, which is how I prefer that we would operate. So how I prefer is that we recognize the value and the worth of the water and wastewater, and then that we now put in place the mechanisms to treat that wastewater properly so that it becomes a substitute. As you may recall, there's a difference between preservation and other things that you do with water. So in this instance now, what you'll be doing is you'll be preserving fresh water for needs that can only be met by fresh water. All right, which is largely more your domestic needs and so on. So that is one of the things that in the medium term we're hoping that more that the attention will be paid to. In the medium term also we're hoping that the attention will be paid to um the how we treat with just generally um how we treat with droughts and how we can create greater resilience to droughts. So it means that we'll have to look at, and it may just be, and not just may, it would be, major infrastructure expenditure for infrastructure that would then put in whatever conveyance in so that you can move water around from where it is in abundance, from where it is in as a supply to where you can bring it in demand. Those are two major ways that we can look at advancing our use of the resource and our preservation of the resource.
All right, so people get that. People pay attention to wastewater is a solution. I mean, everybody or people talk about having that water that whenever you wash the plates and so on, you keep that you have a little something under your sink and you store that, and maybe you
Oh,
can use
yeah,
that for
don't feel no
water.
way, no.
You can use
Don't
that for
feel no
water,
way.
this, that, and the third.
Don't feel no way. A lot of people in and out privately, are doing things that are helping. As we say in Jamaica, every mickle makes a muckle,
Exactly.
right? So we have people who are channeling their sink water to the backyard to help to keep the backyard, green and lush. Or they might have a little, a patch of tomatoes or something around there, and they're using that water to do it. So these things happen. Um, in terms of building up resilience, as well, one of the things, and some places it is the only solution for them is rainwater harvesting. And
Exactly.
quietly people are putting in additional storage. They might be putting in the storage to 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 back up for when the main supply gets locked off. So when your utility locks off for whatever reason, you have a bit of a fail safe of you know uh you have the backstop of 200 gallons or 400 gallons or 1,000 gallons, or even greater. But also in the part of recognizing that the rainwater is available when it comes, then a lot of people have put in a little bit of guttering around the house and channel it to a tank, and they use
Exactly.
that to water the lawn and water the vegetable gardeners.
Kudos to you, kudos to the staff, and just make them know that we appreciate the work that you guys are doing over there. All right.
Yeah, man, I tell you, I have the greatest staff. I mean, we spend time, we spend time out in the field, a lot of time out in the field, gathering data. We're one of the people drawing us, from academia, from development, everywhere. The drawing the resources for developments and subdivision, large subdivisions and whatever you want to build out and so on. And I mean, we're scientists. Largely speaking, we're scientists. I mean, yeah, we have the support. We have our support staff of, admin people that keep us all going and, keep everybody happy and everything. But at the end of the day, we take our work seriously at the water.
Government for that, and public sector gets a bad rap. But I know for a fact, without even a shadow of a doubt, people get up every day to go out there and give their best on behalf of the country. Them get up and go out there to do their best to make sure that, in your case, to make sure that people have water for drink. And it's just funny, people take it for granted, you know what I mean? So them pipe and get the water, and they don't know that it come from somewhere. It's a whole network and infrastructure that connects the water from under the ground, in the rivers, from the sky through rain, to make sure that we have water for drink each and every day. So hey, You know, only believe it or not, when I save lives every day. I mean, just think about hospitals, food preparation, etc., etc., etc. Is much, you know, NWC might get all the plaudits, but kudos to you guys working behind the scenes as well to make sure that this happens, and it happens in an effective and efficient way, consistently as well. All right. You know, I was about to ask you about the developments in terms of being, because that's one thing that's becoming a topical issue in terms of when people put up these new developments, do they have enough water resources to supply and meet the needs? But you know what, I think that's a conversation. To ask you some more information, not to worry, just drop it in the comments. We'll be able to go back with Mr. Clark and send the information to you so that you can be edified, all right? Now remember, our audience plays a major part in our show. And if there's anyone in particular you'd like us to have in the studio, let us know. And we'll try to have that person in studio as soon as possible. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Jamaica Information Service to see who will be in studio next. And while you're at it, go check out Water Resources Authority too. Whole heap of information to be learned. That's wra.gov.jm if I'm not mistaken. You can check them out.
Correct.
Make sure that you're doing the thing the right way. You can always give them a shout to as well. All right, you can call them at 927-0077. All right, Water Resources Authority doing a whole heap of work on behalf of our Jamaican people. But we do this every week live on Facebook. I've been your host, Vaughn Davis, and this has been Studio 58A Live. Thank you so much for joining us, and please have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care and have a good day. Have a good one. You too, Mr. Clark. All right, take care.
All right, Vaughn, take it easy. Have a good one.
You too.